The Drop Site Massacre at Isstvan V is one of the most pivotal moments in the Imperium of mankind. The moment when the cruel hand of fate is revealed, when brother stabbed brother in the back. While the Horus Heresy proper started on Isstvan III with the purging of the loyalists, or more accurately, even likely loyalists, from the traitor legions, it's on Isstvan V when the true treachery of Horus was revealed, and the betrayal of fully half of the demigod sons of the Emperor of mankind, the Primarchs, shook the Imperium and the Emperor to their cores. While it is codified and now sits apart as an extremely important moment in the Warhammer lore, it is still little known history throughout the current Warhammer 40k timeline, and with the original lore of the events having changed dramatically from the Horus Heresy Black Books, though they be treasures of immeasurable value now, it is important to keep in mind that the fog of war lies heavy on the field of battle when it comes to Isstvan V and what happened in the Urgal Depression and after. We'll go over the main beats and events of the lore surrounding the Drop Site Massacre in this video, from the setting of the stage to the death of Primarch Ferrus Manus of the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands, to the final triumph of the traitors in the aftermath of one of the greatest slaughters and most epic battles in all of Imperial history. For the galaxy was a powder keg, lit to pop, and Isstvan V is where it exploded. This is the moment the traitor legions crossed the Rubicon and committed to complete treachery and heresy, kicking off a galactic-scale civil war. The reasons why Horus went to war with his father are many and have been covered extensively on this channel already, so we'll begin with the aftermath of Isstvan III, and the purging of the loyalists from the ranks of the traitors, and Horus's decision to move the fleets to Isstvan V and set up headquarters there. A desolate planet full of ash and dirt, a place without much to look at, dull and lifeless, named after Istvaan, a god from humanity's distant past. Revealed in the novel Fulgrim, in many ways he seems like he may just be the Emperor of mankind, or one of his many guises throughout history. Horus sets up a defensive network on the planet's surface that is nigh impenetrable, dispatching Fulgrim to Isstvan V to build it even as the battle at Isstvan III raged on. Horus was mad at Fulgrim for not bringing Ferrus Manus to his side. Horus had counted on his support, and now knew that instead of the powerful, capable military mind of the Gorgon on his side, he would face him on the field, and thus suffer casualties that he had not accounted for. And if you know Horus, once he gets his mind set, it's made up. But despite his frustration with Fulgrim, Horus knew orbital bombardment would not do the trick to take his bunker systems out. He's dug in, and dug in deep, and the trap is set. The news of the treachery of the Sons of Horus and the Death Guard, World Eaters, and Emperor's Children got to Terra and the Emperor, as Nathaniel Garro escaped the slaughter on Isstvan III aboard the Eisenstein, and met up with Rogal Dorn, delivering the dread news of Horus's treachery. And 7 legions were dispatched to deal with the traitors. 7 legions sent to put down a rebellion in its cradle, but unbeknownst to the loyalists, there were 4 traitor legions among even those. And the speech that Lorgar gave to the 4 traitor legions from that group sent to rein in Horus is golden, like the Aurelian himself. Before the trap was sprung and the loyalists so savagely butchered, Lorgar addressed the Alpha Legion, the Night Lords, the Iron Warriors, and his own word bearers. But it was also in this scene, from the absolutely S++ tier novel, The First Heretic, that we get the first use of one of the greatest war cries and catchphrases in all of Warhammer 40k, from the mouth of none other than Iago Sevatarian Sevatar himself. The Fidelitas Lex played host to a gathering of rare significance. Upon entering the war room, Argol Tal couldn't hold back an exhalation of awe. He'd been expecting a gathering of word-bearer captains, chaplains, and chapter masters. He'd not anticipated the presence of commanders from the Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Iron Warriors, let alone the 3 figures that stood around the central hololithic table. The crowds parted, allowing Lorgar to proceed to the center, where he stood alongside his brothers. None of the 3 welcomed him, just as none of them seemed overly respectful to each other either. Argol Tal grunted acknowledgement of the 2 captains closest to him, as he took his place at the front of the gathered Astartes. Their heraldry offered their identities in flowing Nostraman script. The first, a tall, austere warrior with bronze-plated skulls hanging from his pauldrons on iron chains, bore the numerals of 10th Company and the name etching Malkarian. The second needed no declarations of identity, for everyone knew him as soon as their eyes rested upon him. His armor was wreathed in stretched, leathery patches of flayed skin, and his helm's faceplate was a skullish glare of bleached bone. His was a name spread across the Imperium, almost as notable as that of Abaddon of the Sons of Horus, Eidolon of the Emperor's Children, Raldoron of the Blood Angels, or even the Primarchs themselves. Argoltal inclined his head in respect to Sevatar, first captain of the Night Lord's Legion. The warrior nodded in return. "You are late," his voice issued forth as a grinding snarl. Argoltal didn't rise to the Night Lord's bait. "How perceptive of you," he replied. "You can read a chronometer." A guttural grunt of amusement issued from Sevatar's skull-painted helm. In the center of the gathered leaders and lords, Lorgar raised his hands for silence. The baiting, grumbling, and occasional laughter between the Astartes died down. "Time is short," said the Golden Primarch, "and events are already in motion. Those of us in this room are under no illusions as to what we face. 8 legions, of which we are 4, and countless worlds are rising in rebellion against the Imperium. If we are to march on Terra and take the throne, we must annihilate those legions remaining loyal to the Emperor, and we must do so alone. No matter how loyal our army regiments are, they will be devastated if they are committed to the surface of Istvaan. So we wage war without them. Astartes against Astartes, brother against brother. There is a poetry to that I am sure you will all appreciate." No one said a word. Lorgar continued. "You have all walked different paths, but together we come to the same destination. The Emperor has failed us. The Imperium has failed us all." Here, Lorgar nodded to the largest gathering of Night Lords in their lightning-streaked warplate. "It has failed us by the laxity of its laws, the decadence of its culture, and in the injustices heaped upon those of us who served most loyally." He gestured to the bare metal ceramite of the Iron Warriors' captains. "It has failed us by never recognizing our virtues, never rewarding us for the blood we have shed in bringing about its ascendancy, and never providing unity when we needed it most." The Alpha Legion stood impassive and silent in their scaled armor. "It has failed us," Lorgar inclined his head to them, "by being flawed to its core, imperfect in its pursuit of a perfect culture, and in its weakness against the encroachment of Xenos breeds that seek to twist humanity to alien ends." Finally, the Primarch turned to his own captains, their gray armor decorated with prayer scrolls. "And it has failed us, most of all, by being founded upon lies. The Imperium is forged by a dangerous deceit, and erodes us all by demanding we sacrifice truth on the altar of necessity. This is an empire propagated by sin that deserves to die. And here on Isstvan V, we begin the purge. From these ashes shall rise the new kingdom of mankind, an Imperium of justice, faith, and enlightenment. An Imperium heralded, commanded, and protected by the avatars of the gods themselves. An empire strong enough to stand through a future of blood and fire." The change in the room was subtle, but impossible for Astartes' senses to miss. Every warrior stood taller, straighter, their hands resting upon the hilts and handles of sheathed weapons. "The Emperor believes us loyal. Our 4 legions were ordered here on that misguided conviction alone. But our coalition here and now is the fruit of decades worth of planning. It was ordained and brought about according to ancient prophecy. No more hiding in the shadows, no more manipulating fleet movements and falsifying expeditionary data. From this day forward, the Alpha Legion, the Word Bearers, the Iron Warriors, and the Night Lords stand together, bloodied but unbowed beneath the flag of War Master Horus, the Second Emperor, the true Emperor." The Astartes stared, none of them moving a muscle. The Primarch could have been addressing an army of statues. "I see your eyes," Lorgar's smile took in the room. "Even behind your helms, I see the hesitation, the unease, the mistrust of the very brothers by your side. We are not friends, are we? We have never been allies. Our legions are kin by bloodline, yet not brought together in proven, chosen brotherhood. But remember this as you look upon the shades of armor so different to your own. You are united by righteousness. You are united in revenge. Every weapon in this room is wielded for the same cause, and that, my sons, brothers, and cousins, that is all the strength we need. After today, we will be brothers. The Forge of War will see to that." Silence reigned in the wake of Lorgar's words. The Primarch turned back to the hololithic table, already entering the codes necessary to activate the image generator, when several muted clanks sounded behind him. Lorgar turned over his shoulder, seeking the sound's sources. Several word-bearers captains were shaking hands with their counterparts in the other legions, with more joining in every moment. They gripped wrist to wrist, a traditional warrior gesture to seal a pact. Argol Tal offered his hand to Sevatar. The Night Lord gripped the word-bearer's wrist as their emotionless faceplates met each other's eyes. "Death to the false emperor," said Sevatar, becoming the first living soul to utter the words that would echo through the millennia. The curse was taken up by other voices, and soon it was being cried in full-throated roars. "Death to the false emperor! Death to the false emperor! Death! Death! Death!" As a self-described heretic, this hits me with all the feels. Like, it's one of those keystone moments that probably gets glossed over by history, but it echoes throughout eternity with every time the phrase is chanted by the enemies of the Imperium. Okay, so some gnarly shit goes down when the loyalist forces make planetfall. Ferrus knows that he's got 4 hours to hold out against superior forces until the reinforcements he's so desperately depending on arrive. But he's so stubborn, headstrong, and blinded by his rage and need to kill Fulgrim that he loses his cool, and it costs him his head. The first Primarch to die. At least the first Primarch that wasn't redacted and erased from history by the Edict of Obliteration. So initially the Raven Guard and Salamanders fleets arrived above Istvaan, and then the Iron Hands showed up. But the Bird Boys and the Dragon Warriors of Vulkan had already been mapping Horus's positions from orbit and doing recon missions. And like I said earlier, it was Ferrus's call to go down and fight Horus before the other 4 legions arrived, though that was completely contradictory to their orders from Big E. And people wonder why the Emperor made the Custodes incapable of disobeying him. This is a perfect example of that. But before the epic battle unfolds and the fate of the galaxy begins to unravel with a duel of brothers, the Gorgon and his Morlock Terminators absolutely tore through the Emperor's children. Their drop pods got tore up on the way down, but the orbital bombardment had destroyed enough anti-air batteries that most made it to the surface. And Ferrus Manus and his elite bodyguard, the Morlocks, were in one of the first drop pods to land, and they immediately started getting chewed up by bolter fire as soon as the ramps deployed. A Titan even started opening up on the Loyalists, killing scores like it was nothing, and about 100 Marines from the Death Guard and Sons of Horus came at Ferrus and his boys, trying to repel them. But none could stand before the might and the wrath of the Gorgon. He was war made flesh, and he was all out of bubblegum. Okay, that was a reference to John Carpenter's They Live, the greatest documentary ever made about how government actually works. At the same instant that Ferrus was smashing his way toward the center of the Urgal Depression, Vulkan's drop pod smashed down from orbit and the first of the Salamanders on Isstvan V deployed. Immediately, they were struck with a precision artillery strike, which Vulkan survived, but wrecked a ton of his sons, his elite fire drakes. But like Ferrus, the Lord of Drakes was a living embodiment of death and destruction, an avatar of war, and none could stand before the 2 Primarchs as they destroyed their way through everything and everyone that stepped to them. The opening gambit of the Battle of Isstvan V was looking great for the forces of the Loyalists, but that's just what Horus wanted them to think. On the other side of the Urgal Depression, the second wave of Loyalists deployed, and they brought the big guns with them, coming down on Thunderhawks and Stormbirds and bringing super heavy tanks, artillery, and tens of thousands of Astartes. They came out strong. And no matter what lay ahead of them, they would be making the traitors pay with blood and death. The might of the second wave coming from the other side of the Depression, and the wrath of Ferrus Manus carrying him forward far into enemy lines, saw the traitors start to falter a bit. And that is when Corvus Corax hit the traitor forces from the other flank, leading a jump pack assault personally on the left flank of the traitors' position. And the traitors were really just letting the Loyalists get overconfident as they saw this all coming, and Angron led his World Eaters from ambush positions in a counterattack, just butchering Raven Guard like crazy. Horus Aximand and Ezekiel Abaddon. Look, in some books they call him Ezekiel, and in some they call him Ezekiel, which I prefer, and that's what I call him. But don't get confused or feel like you need to make your point in the comments. We're talking about the same dude, and the one and only who becomes the despoiler in Warhammer 40k. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, Little Horus and Kyle push in and inspire their troops, getting the Sons of Horus to hold the line and just destroying anyone who came close to them. It cannot be overstated just how absolutely great of a warrior Abaddon really was, and how much of a killing machine. He was big for an Astartes, and very, very skilled, and very level-headed. The guy was made for this role, as he was a natural leader. Seeing the best of their legion, and 2 members of the Mournival fighting beside them, inspired the Sons of Horus to hang in there, and the day got a lot more brutal and savage for both sides. Already much blood had been spilled, but we're just getting started. Mortarion took the field, doing for the already stoic and ready-to-die Death Guard what Abaddon and Horus Oxymond were doing for the 16th Legion. The presence of the Primarch on the field inspiring them to new heights of brutality, treachery, heresy, and butchery. The scythe of Mortarion reaping scores of Astartes with each of its mighty swings. If war is hell, then a full pantheon of avatars of hell itself were going at it in the field, in the Herbal Depression, on Isstvan V. Ferrus Manus' furious advance got stopped cold in its tracks as his Morlocks ran into the Emperor's Children's new unit, one of which they had yet to encounter, the Noise Marines. And the sonic weaponry just started wrecking the Terminator elite of the 10th Legion. This slowing of the advance of the Iron Hand seemed dire, but it didn't last more than a few moments, as by then, the heavy armor of the Legion was able to make it around the depression and provide heavy support, freeing up the Morlocks to resume their advance, then turning their attention to the traitorous Titan Degenerate. The combined force of the heavy artillery and the super heavy tanks taking out the void shields of the Titan and giving the infantry reprieve from its godlike weaponry. Then First Captain Julius Caesaron of the Emperor's Children met Gabriel Santar, First Captain of the Iron Hands, in single combat. From the novel Fulgrim, Book 5 of the Horus Heresy series, Julius rolled to his feet in time to see a burnished group of Terminators lumbering towards him, and he grinned in feral glee as he saw they were led by Gabriel Santar, the First Captain's markings on his armor standing out like a beacon in the darkness. A whooshing roar of clashing noise tore a great furrow in the ground beside him and blasted upwards from the black sand like a volcanic eruption. Behind him, Julius saw the flesh-wrapped form of Marius and roared with the pleasure of seeing his fellow captain alive and fighting. Marius Verocian had embellished his armor with jagged iron spikes and had torn the skin from the dead of La Fenice and decorated his blood-slathered plates. Like Julius, he had not walked away from the Meraviglia without alteration. The monstrous distension of his jaws locked his mouth open in a constant howling scream. Where his ears had once been were 2 giant gashes carved in his flesh, and his eyes were stitched open, forever prevented from closing. He still carried the great musical instrument he had taken from Beck Wakinska's orchestra, modified to bear spiked handles and grips to render it into a terrifying sonic weapon. Together, he and his fellows unleashed a barrage of discordant scales that sent a dozen of the Morlocks into convulsions, and Julius screamed his appreciation as he leapt to meet Gabriel Santar with his sword aimed at his throat. The horror of what he was seeing almost cost Gabriel Santar his life. The Emperor's Children before him were like nothing he could ever have imagined in his worst nightmares. Though the enemies he had fought before had been honorless traitors, at least they had still been recognizable as Astartes. These were degenerate perversions of that perfect ideal, warped and twisted freaks who openly displayed their perversions. A mutilated monster in power armor draped with bloody flaps of skin shrieked as he swept some bizarre weapon back and forth, its deadly sonic energies tearing warriors apart in explosions of ruptured armor and liquefied flesh. Even as Santar raised his energized fist to block a sword cut aimed at his head, he recognized the twisted features of Julius Caesaron. The warrior was a thrashing dervish, laughing and howling as he spun like a lunatic around Santar, slashing wildly as he attacked. Caesaron's weapon was a fearsome, energized glaive that was easily capable of carving through his armor, and Santar turned as fast as he was able to block each ferocious stroke of the blade, but even one as fast as he could not hope to match his opponent's serpent-like speed. He caught the descending blade of his opponent's weapon between the digits of his energy-wreathed fist, and a fiery explosion burst between them. He twisted his wrist, and Julius's blade snapped, leaving only the length of a forearm above the quillins. Santar grunted in pain as he felt the skin of his fist fuse with the melted plates around his hand. He saw Julius sprawled on his back, the ceramite armor of his breastplate bubbling with the residue of the explosion, his face a screaming burnt horror of seared flesh and exposed bone. Despite the pain of his burned claw of a hand, Santar grinned beneath his helmet and stomped forwards to deliver the avenging death blow to his hated enemy. He raised his foot to stomp down on Julius's chest, the power of his Terminator armor easily able to crush Astartes' plate. Then he saw that Julius wasn't screaming in pain, but in orgasmic pleasure. He paused in revulsion for the briefest second, but that second was all that Julius needed. Sweeping up the broken edge of his glaive, the blade alive with flaring energies, he rammed it into Santar's groin. The pain was unimaginable, surging agonizingly around his body. Julius Caesarion tore the remains of the weapon upward, molten gobbets of armor dropping to the dark sand in the midst of a spraying rain of Santar's blood. The blade tore through his pubis and ripped into his breastplate, as Julius rose to his feet with the motion of his sawing weapon. Santar's entire body convulsed in agony, not even the frantically pumping pain bombs able to mask the horrifying agony of having his torso carved open. He tried to move, but his armor was locked in place as Julius looked directly at him. His face was horrifically illuminated in the firelight of the battle. The skin peeled away from the musculature beneath, and the white gleam of bone jutting through his cheeks. Even amid the thunder of battle, and with his lips burned away, Julius's next words were horribly clear to Santar as his life slipped away. "Thank you," gurgled Julius. "That was exquisite." Okay, so the next thing that happened was the beginning of the end. You know that saying, blessing in disguise? Well, this is the exact opposite of that. For this is when the second wave of reinforcements arrived, and this time it was in the form of the other 4 legions that were dispatched to deal with Horus. The Night Lords, Word Bearers, Iron Warriors, and Alpha Legion all made successful drops into the drop zone that the Loyalists had established, taking up positions all along the flanks and the already fortified positions, bolstering the Loyalist troops and more than doubling the might they could bring to bear. The sudden appearance of 4 more legions caused the traitors to fall into disarray. Even Mortarion, Angron, and the Titan Degenerate fell back. But of course, this was all part of the plan. A plan conceived by the greatest strategists and the most treacherous minds in the entire Imperium. Between Horus, Lorgar, Perturabo, and Alpharius, the Loyalists were dealing with not just genius and tactical prowess unlike anything even they had fought before, but with a callousness and cruelty never seen before. It was then that Ferrus Manus found fulgrim on the field. He noticed where the Emperor's Children command group was and ordered his Morlocks to make right for it. But this time the ground was soaked with blood, and thousands had died already. It was war unlike the Astartes had ever known. For up until the treachery and betrayal at Isstvan III and Isstvan V, Astartes had not really fought one another. Not on a scale like this, at least. So Corvus Corax and Vulkan wanted to use the lull in the fighting that came as the result of the massive amount of reinforcements to hit the field to their advantage, to resupply and reload, and take the fight onto the enemy's positions together, refreshed and reinvigorated, with fully loaded weapons. But Ferrus didn't care. He pushed ahead anyway, unsupported. He pushed into the enemy's position, fast and heedlessly. He didn't care about reason or tactics or even what would work or not. He just saw red and wanted vengeance for the insult fulgrim had dealt him at their last meeting. Unfortunately for the Iron Hands, as they lost not only their Primarch, but the Morlocks as well. Again, from the novel Fulgrim, the moment when Ferrus Manus falls in battle to his corrupted brother, Lord of the 3rd Legion. "Horus has commanded your death, but for the sake of our past friendship, I shall plead your case to him if you throw down your arms. You have to surrender, Ferrus. There is no escape." Ferrus Manus tore his eyes from the slaughter of the Loyalist forces, his teeth bared with the volcanic fury of his home world. "Maybe not, traitor, but only dishonor holds any terror for me," spat Ferrus. "The Emperor's loyal warriors will not surrender to you. Not now, not ever. You will have to kill every last one of us." "So be it," said Fulgrim, launching himself towards Ferrus Manus, swinging his mighty warhammer. The Primarch's weapons, forged in brotherhood but wielded in vengeance, met in a blazing plume of energy, and the battlefield was illuminated for hundreds of meters by their ferocious energies. The true Primarchs traded blows with their monstrously powerful weapons, the strength to defeat armies and topple mountains unleashed as they fought like gods forced to end their dispute in the realm of mortals. Ferrus Manus wielded his flaming blade in fiery slashes, his every blow defeated by the ebony-hafted hammer he had borne in countless campaigns. Fulgrim swung his hammer in great looping arcs, its heavy head powerful enough to crush the armor of a titan to paste. Both warriors fought with the hatred only brothers divided can muster, their armor dented, torn and blackened by the fury of their conflict. To fight an opponent of such magnificence was a privilege, and fulgrim savored every clash of hammer and sword, every fiery line cut across his flesh, and every grunt of pain torn from his brother's mouth as Forgebreaker glanced his armor. They circled in the midst of cries of pain and roaring savage glee, the Morlocks of Ferrus Manus slain, but for a last few desperate heroes. Ferrus cut the shoulder guard from Fulgrim's armor and spun inside his guard to deliver a lethal thrust towards his groin. Fulgrim stepped to meet the blow, batting aside the tip of the fiery sword with the haft of Forgebreaker, and hammering the warhammer's head toward Ferrus's skull. The Primarch of the Iron Hands took the blow, dropping to one knee and lashing out with his blade. As blood streamed from the terrible wound in his temple, the sword's fiery tip cut across Fulgrim's stomach, opening his armor and tearing through his flesh. The pain was indescribable, and Fulgrim fell back, dropping his hammer as his hands sought to stem the blood pouring from his body. Both Primarchs faced each other on their knees through a haze of pain and blood, and Fulgrim once again felt an ache of sadness well within him. The pain of his wounds and the sight of his brother's broken skull coated in blood tore a window into his mind. The sensation was like a powerful gust of fresh mountain air, clearing away the fog that had wrapped him in a suffocating embrace for so long that he no longer noticed it until it was gone. "My brother," he whispered. "My friend." "You have long since lost the right to call me friend," snarled Ferrus, pushing himself to his feet and staggering towards Fulgrim with Fireblade raised to smite him. Fulgrim cried out, and his hand leapt unbidden to his waist as the flaming blade carved a burning path towards his neck. Silver steel flashed as he drew the sword he had taken from the lair temple and blocked the descending weapon. Ferrus's sword hissed and spat as it bit into the silver blade, the Primarch of the Iron Hand's strength forcing the blazing metal centimeter by centimeter towards Fulgrim's face.
"No!"
cried Fulgrim.
"This is not right."
The amethyst stone at the hilt of Fulgrim's sword pulsed with an evil light, bathing Ferrus Manus' face in a leering purple glare. Energy streamed from the blade, and musky smoke billowed around them, deadening sounds and obscuring light. Fulgrim felt a monstrous presence swell around him, its power and nameless essence more intoxicating and dreadful than anything he could have ever imagined. Diabolical strength flooded his limbs, and he pushed against the power of Ferrus Manus, feeling his brother's surprise at his resistance. With a cry of animal rage, he surged to his feet and hurled Ferrus Manus back, spinning and lashing out with his sword. The silver edge bit deep into the breastplate of his brother's armor, and the Primarch of the Iron Hands cried out, falling to his knees once again as the blade's flaring energies parted his dark armor like a fingernail through cold grease. Hot blood sprayed from the wound, and Fireblade slid from Ferrus's hand as he gasped in fierce agony. "Finish him! Kill him!" the voice screamed, and to Fulgrim it seemed as though it echoed across time and space as well as within his skull. He staggered with the blunt force of its imperative, lurching as though his limbs were not his to control. His normal grace and elan were forsaken as he falteringly raised the silver sword in preparation of delivering the death blow to Ferrus Manus. Unknown energies coruscated along the notched blade and down the length of his arms into the meat and bone of his wounded body. Fulgrim was wreathed in purple fire. Crackling arcs of lightning caressed him with a lover's tenderness, seeking out his open wounds and licking them with balefire as they sought entry to his flesh. Fulgrim stood above Ferrus Manus, his chest heaving convulsively as his entire body shook with the violence of the power that sought to claim him. He must die.
"Otherwise, he will kill you."
Fulgrim looked down at his defeated opponent and saw his own reflection in the mirrors of Ferrus's eyes. In an instant that stretched for an eternity, he saw what he had become and what monstrous betrayal he had allowed himself to be party to. He knew in that eternal moment that he had made a terrible mistake in drawing the sword from the lair temple, and he fought to release the damnable blade that had brought him so low. His grip was locked onto the weapon, and even as he recognized how far he had fallen, he knew that he had come too far to stop. The realization, coupled with the knowledge that everything he had striven for had been a lie. As though moving in slow motion, Fulgrim saw Ferrus Manus reaching for his fallen sword, his fingers closing around the wire-wound grip, the flames leaping once more to the blade at its creator's touch.
"Kill him before he kills you. Now!"
Fulgrim's blade seemed to move with a life of its own, but it had no need of such impellence, for he swung the blade of his own volition. The silver blade clove the air as it swept towards Ferrus Manus, and Fulgrim felt the ancient triumph of its presence that he now knew had dwelt within it all this time. He tried desperately to pull the blow, but his muscles were no longer his own to control. Unnatural, warp-forged steel met the iron flesh of a Primarch, its aberrant edge cutting through Ferrus's skin, muscle, and bone with a shrieking howl that echoed in realms beyond those knowable to mortals. Blood and the monumental energies bound within the meat and gristle of one of the Emperor's sons erupted from the wound, and Fulgrim fell back as the searing powers blinded him, dropping the silver sword at his side. He heard a shrieking wail as of a choir of banshees whip around him as phantom, skeletal hands clawed at him, and 1,000 voices tore at his mind. Ghostly whirlwinds seized him and spun him around, twisting him like a limp rag in their grip, and threatening to tear him limb from limb in retribution. Even as he welcomed such oblivion, he felt another presence move to protect him. The same presence that had guided his sword arm, the same presence that had been his constant companion since Laren, though he had not known it. Fulgrim fell to the ground as the winds released him and faded with a shrieking howl of anguished frustration. He landed heavily and rolled onto his side, heaving great gulps of cold air into his lungs as the sound of battle returned to him. He heard cries of pain, gunfire, explosions, and the rhythmic crack of bolters as they fired relentless volley after volley. It was the sound of death. It was the sound of a massacre. His entire body aching with pain and loss, Fulgrim pushed himself upright. Blood and the detritus of battle surrounded him. The stoic figures of armored warriors staring in wonder at the headless body that lay on the black ground before him. Fulgrim took a shuddering breath and raised his hands to the heavens, screaming his loss at the sight of his brother so cruelly murdered. It's very telling that later, after the battle, Fulgrim considered destroying Horus's fleet, if only for the briefest of moments. He gave in to the demon ultimately, and didn't do it. But his grief over killing his best friend, his brother Ferrus Manus, is quite real and extremely tragic. As Ferrus fell in battle, as the Morlocks were slain, the Raven Guard and Salamanders were just about to get back to the drop site, and a single flare went up from Horus's command position. Lighting the sky, the signal was given. Within 100 yards of rearming and resupplying, the Salamanders and Raven Guard were cut down by those they considered brothers. The Word Bearers, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, and Alpha Legion all turned guns on them and wasted them like ducks in a barrel. The first salvos absolutely massacred the legions. The 18th and 19th shattered. Vulkan and Corax could not agree on what to do. Vulkan wanted to dig in and use their ships as cover. Corax wanted to flee as he knew just how bad the situation was. Ultimately, their disagreement resulted in more catastrophe. Corax ordered his legion to retreat by any means necessary. The Iron Hands were slaughtered to a man, as those traitors who were supposedly retreating turned back around and destroyed them, having overextended and gotten cut off, and also they lost their Primarch. It was a sad, sad day for the Iron Hands. Primarch Lorgar, Corferon, and Erebus of the Word Bearers threw themselves at the Raven Guard, and the possessed Marines of the Gal Vorbak fought none other than Corvus Corax himself. But they got cut down easily by the Primarch, despite their state of possession, and Lorgar decided to intervene, to try to save his sons like Argel Tal, the leader of the Gal Vorbak. Corvus Corax is holding up the Word Bearers so that as many of his sons as possible can escape the massacre, and Lorgar is going in to face him in combat even though he's only a nominally good fighter for a Primarch and he knows he could die. They both are two dads who are putting it all on the line for their respective sons. From the novel The First Heretic. Corvax evaded the Crozius without even once parrying. He weaved aside, threw himself out of reach, or fired his flight pack with enough force to boost him up and over Lorgar's heavy swings. By contrast, sweat stung Lorgar's eyes as he desperately blocked each of his brother's attacks. Illuminarum's great hammerhead rang like a church bell as it battered inside the Ravenlord's claws.
What are you doing?
Corax cried into his brother's face as their weapons locked.
What madness has taken you all?
Lorgar disengaged, hurling Corax backward with enough strength to leave his brother unbalanced. The Ravenlord compensated instantly, his flight pack breathing fire and propelling him back at his brother. Bladed wings flashed out to the side, but Lorgar was ready for them. He ignored their scraping, cutting wounds as he knifed through his armor and focused on hammering Corax's claws aside. In the second safety he bought for himself, Lorgar at last landed a true blow. Corax was sent sprawling again as the Crozius pounded into his breastplate. The power field around the Maul's head struck with enough force to send a shockwave blasting out from the warring brothers, throwing all nearby Astartes to the ground. In less time than it took to breathe in, Corax was back on his feet, thrusters firing, spearing at Lorgar once more.
Answer me, traitor,
the Raven Lord grunted. His dark eyes were narrowed at the sickening light that haloed Lorgar.
You are a poor reflection of our father, with that psychic gold.
Lorgar felt himself slipping back in the mud, his boots grinding across the earth as his brother's strength leaned heavier against him. He couldn't break the weapon lock this time, but Corax's claws clutched at Illuminarum's haft, burning the handle in the word-bearer's hands. I am bringing the truth to humanity, Lorgar breathed.
You are destroying the Imperium. You are betraying your own blood.
The wildness in the Raven Lord's black eyes was something Lorgar had never even imagined before. Corax had always seemed so taciturn, so devoid of passion. That this warrior lay beneath the albino facade was a horrendous revelation. The claw tips, splitting with crackling power fields, were a finger's length from Lorgar's face now.
I will kill you, Lorgar.
I know, he spoke through gritted teeth, feeling strength bleed from his bones, but I have seen what will be. Our father, a bloodless corpse enthroned upon gold and screaming into the void forever.
Lies.
The black eyes narrowed, and the Raven Lord's pale muscles bunched, locking harder.
You are reducing a kingdom to chaos, overthrowing the perfect order.
Lorgar's gray eyes danced with light despite the strain on his body. The opposite of chaos is not order, brother. It is stasis, lifeless, unchanging stasis. With a last grunt, Lorgar's strength gave. Quivering hands could no longer keep his brother's weapons back. Here it is, Corax promised in a hiss, his saliva flecking Lorgar's eyes and cheeks. Here is the death you so richly deserve. The claws reached his brother's face. Slowly, the metal burning hot, they sliced over Lorgar's golden skin, inch by inch, blackening the golden flesh, cutting into the meat of his cheeks. Even should he escape, he would bear these scars until the day he died. He knew this, and did not care. The psychic fire wreathing them both flared in response to Lorgar's pain. Corax closed his eyes to spare his sight. An instinct cost him his quick victory. Lorgar threw the Raven Lord back again. Illuminarum rose, ready to strike, before a burst of smoky fire launched the Raven Lord up from the soil to come down on Lorgar from above. The word-bearer smashed the first claw aside, striking the fist with enough force to shatter the gauntlet completely. But even as scythe-long claw blades span off into the surrounding melee, the second claw struck home. Meter-long talons sank through Lorgar's stomach, the tips glinting to the side of his spine as they thrust from his back. Such a blow meant little to a Primarch. Only when Corax heaved upwards did Lorgar stagger. The claws bit and cut, sawing through the word-bearer's body. Illuminarum slipped from the impaled Primarch's fists. Those same hands wrapped around Corax's throat even as the Raven Lord was carving his brother in half.
For the Emperor!
Corax breathed, untroubled by his weaker brother's grip. Lorgar crushed his forehead against Corax's face, shattering his brother's nose. But still, he couldn't free himself. The Raven Lord gave no ground, even as a second, third, and fourth headbutt decimated his delicate features. But he lied to us, Lorgar spoke through lips that produced more blood than language. Father lied. The claws jerked, snagged against Lorgar's enhanced bones. Corax tore them free, inflicting more damage than the first impaling had done. Blood hissed and popped as it evaporated on the force-fielded blades. Father lied, Lorgar said again. He was on his knees, hands clutched over the ruination of his stomach. Corax's black eyes gave nothing away. He stepped closer, his one functioning claw raised to execute his brother. Do it, Lorgar snarled. The psychic wind, the misty fire, all were gone now. He was as he'd always been. Lorgar, the 17th son, the image of his father, the one soul in 20 who'd never wished to be a soldier, and here he would die at the heart of a battlefield. The foul irony of the moment settled on his shoulders, feeling grotesquely apt. He couldn't move his legs. His body was a temple to nothing but pain. He could barely even see his executioner, for his psychic efforts had left him quivering with both weakness and a vision-blurring ache in his mind. A faint outline met his gaze, the blurred image of scythe blades raised high. Do it, Lorgar screamed at his brother. The claw fell and struck opposing metal. Corax looked to meet eyes as black as his, and a face as pale as his own. His claw strained against a mirroring weapon, both sets of blades scraping as they ground against each other, one claw seeking to fall and kill, the other unyielding in its rising defense. Where the Raven Guard Primarch's features were fierce with effort, the other face wore a grin, It was a smile both taut and mirthless, a dead man's smile once his lips had surrendered to rigor mortis.
Corax,
Said the other Primarch.
Curse.
Corax said the name as the curse it was.
Look into my eyes,
Said the progenitor of the Night Lord's Legion.
and see your death.
Corax sought to wrench his claw free, but Kurz's second gauntlet closed on his brother's wrist.
No.
Kurz's laughter was as joyless as his smile.
Do not fly away, little raven. Stay. We're not finished, you and I. Conrad,
Corax tried.
why have you done this?
Kurz ignored the plea. He turned his void-like eyes on the prone Lorgar, with disgust written plain across his carcass face.
Rise from your knees, you accursed coward.
Lorgar sought to do just that, using his brother's midnight blue armor as a crutch to haul himself to his feet. Kurz bared his sharpened teeth.
You are the foulest weakling I have ever seen, Lorgar.
Corax was not idle as this exchange took place. He fired his flight pack, burning his fuel reserves to escape Kurz's grip. The Raven Lord's claw ripped free, and Corax soared skyward, carried on jet thrust away from Kurz's rising laughter. On the ground, Kurz shook himself free of Lorgar.
Sevatar,
He spoke into the Vox.
the Raven comes to you, to free his men.
Battle sounds, bolter fire, the roar of tank engines.
We will deal with him, Lord. See that you do.
Kurz shoved Lorgar back towards his word bearers. Around them both, the Grey Legion warred with the warriors in black.
I am done with you, Golden One. Go back to killing Astartes with your pretty hammer.
Lorgar's preternatural biology was regenerating his damaged tissue with alacrity, but the Primarch was shivering and weak as he reached for the fallen Crozius. Thank you, Conrad. The Raven Guard and Salamanders were being cut up by sentry guns and point defense weapons that were set up ahead of time, stumbling from ambush to ambush as they tried to flee. Mortarion, Angron, and the Disarray re-entered the fray, cutting down tens of thousands like it was nothing. And Horus himself sallied forth to do battle at the head of the Justarian Terminators of Falcus Kyber. It was grim indeed, absolutely hopeless. And then, that's when the Salamanders got nuked. Like, literally nuked. The Iron Warriors deployed a tactical nuclear weapon and fried the Salamanders. Vulkan was thought lost, as nobody yet knew he was a perpetual, and retreat seemed like a lost cause as the Iron Warriors had turned their guns on the drop ships that first bore the loyalists to Istvaan. The loyal fleets were decimated in orbit by the traitors, so even in escape there was hardly anywhere to go. It was as bad a situation as a situation could ever get. Mostly Raven Guard escaped, though a few Salamanders, and surprisingly even a few Iron Hands, also made it to ships and were able to scram from the drop zone. Contrary to the original lore in the old black books, which stated that only 5 loyalist marines in total survived the massacre. Glad that was retconned, actually. But Corax got aboard a Thunderhawk and it was shot down and crashed outside the Urgel Plateau. Vulkan would eventually come to, a prisoner aboard the Nightfall, flagship of Conrad Kurz, and there he would die about 1.5 billion times at the hands of, and imagination of, his brother, the Night Haunter. Corax survived the crash and rallied what Raven Guard he could, but finding out in the process that he'd lost between 75 and 90% of his entire legion. Then they were harried by the Iron Warriors' armored column, which Corax quickly neutralized due to some quick thinking and ingenuity, before moving his hiding spot to a new position. 30 days after the massacre, Corvus still had heard no word from the Salamanders or Iron Hands. He moved his men to a place called the Lurgan Ridge and had them dig in and fortify the position before embarking on a reconnaissance mission to the drop site. Corax used his Wraith Slip ability, his psi-clouding power, to basically be invisible right among the traitors, and he moved in their ranks. His stated mission purpose was recon, but he spent most of his time actually looking for his missing brothers, which to his dismay he did not find. On the 98th day, the World Eaters caught up with the Raven Guard, and sent a barrage of artillery fire their way from a battery of whirlwinds. Corax only had 3,000 Raven Guard with him at that point, all that was left of his once mighty legion. But just as it looked like the end for them, Raven Guard dropships came down as orbital bombardments and air-to-surface missiles took out the World Eaters' whirlwinds, and Corax and his boys were finally rescued. The Primarch made it off of Isstvan finally, but with only 3,000 of the 80,000 troops he'd arrived with. But unknown to both Corvus Corax and Horus Lupercal, Alpharius, Primarch of the Alpha Legion, had allowed Corax to escape as part of his plan. For Alpharius is the master of deception, unmatched by any other Primarch. He'd have to answer to Horus for it, but when he turns a dressing down into an unexpected surprise, it gains him much favor with the War Master, and sows the seeds of doubt throughout the traitor legions, for the events that unfold as a result of Korax escaping are even more emotionally devastating on the 19th Legion's Primarch than even losing 77,000 Astartes in one battle and facing multiple brothers on the field. And people wonder why Corvus ends up with super depression. This is just the beginning of his sorrows, as much as it seems like the full tsunami to him at the moment. As tragic as it all is, it's just a baby pool compared to the heartbreak that's coming for him, but that's for another video entirely. The opening gambit of Horus's play for the throne itself was done, the galaxy torn in two, as civil war had come full force to engulf the Imperium of Man. Horus Lupercal's insane victory at Isstvan V would set the galaxy on fire, keeping the loyalist forces on the back foot for the entirety of the Horus Heresy. There is much that unfolds in the aftermath of the Drop Site Massacre, and none of the legions involved would ever be the same after, loyalist or traitor. I hope you enjoyed my takes on this most pivotal of the moments in the Warhammer setting. Don't forget to like, subscribe, become a channel member, share the video, leave a super thanks, and burn some heretics for the Emperor. Thanks for watching.